Bring in Mark Levin, host of Life, Liberty, and Levin, who's joining us on the phone. Mark, your reaction to what we're hearing this afternoon. Welcome.
Well, I read the indictment, thank you, and there's a lot of fury. How many documents were actually destroyed? Doesn't say. How many documents were actually altered? Doesn't say. Wouldn't you think if documents were destroyed and altered that would be right at the beginning of the indictment list of charges? We have boxes removed. Okay, so what? What happened to the boxes? We have people were told maybe they would consider, according to the indictment, he signaled to me to get rid of stuff. Nothing was gotten rid of. I'm sure the prosecutor looked. I'm sure he was desperate to find some actual physical act that would demonstrate that all this fury from witnesses and supposed statements and so forth, and this is the kind of thing the defense is going to do. They're going to say, what harm are they even talking about? We didn't destroy anything. We were negotiating. The man lives in two places, so he brought boxes with him. As a matter of fact, your guest should know that he put together a book on letters that he received from foreign leaders, including Un from North Korea and so forth. It could be as innocent as that. We haven't had a single argument from any of Trump's lawyers. They haven't even had an opportunity to read this indictment until now to respond to this. So everybody's going through this and going, wow, he could be serving 4 billion years. Wow, he could be doing this. Wow, he could be doing that. It could be awful. This is a strong indictment. And I'm looking for, okay, what was destroyed? Nothing. What was altered? Nothing. Oh, he moved boxes. Okay, he moved boxes. What happened with the box? Nothing. Nothing. And so there are arguments that can be made on a substantive ground, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just here off the top of my head thinking about them. Talk about Hillary Clinton. People, you can't compare this to Hillary Clinton, and they're right. Hillary destroyed 30,000 emails in a way that was a permanent destruction. She wasn't a president or former president. They destroyed cell phones with hammers. There was no warrant. There was no SWAT team. She had a private server in her home. She lied, arguing it wasn't classified information. They found classified information. How is the Department of Justice going to argue that its official government position in 2012 was that they can't bring charges against Hillary Clinton? And their official position today is, oh, we've got false statements, we've got conspiracy to obstruct. Look at all these photos. We got boxes on the floor here. Okay, what happened to any of those documents in those pictures on the floor? Well, they don't tell us. Did somebody steal anything? They don't tell us. Look at the cover. We know that they're classified because we see something's redacted. Okay, so what? What happened to that document? With all the witnesses that they had, all the violations of attorney-client privilege, all the extraordinary authority that these judges gave them in Washington, D.C., which is a controversy that has to be resolved. You do have due process rights. We need to know about that. So I do agree that when you pile on, in the case of Trump, 37 charges, basically 31 of which are the same charge, the retention of documents, you got to peel it away and peel it away and peel it away. But I want the audience to understand there is not a scintilla of information in this 50-page document, in these 38 charges, that a single document was destroyed, that a single document was altered, that a single foreign country got any information of any kind whatsoever. I just wanted to make that point.
Well, I hear you, Mark. And, I guess there is no, there's no charge here for destruction of documents. That's not that's not among these at all. The obstruction is the request to have them returned, and then they're laying out a case here that when they requested them to be returned, there were efforts to make it appear that they didn't have the documents, or maybe they could hide the documents from the government.
There can be all kinds of efforts. There can be all kinds of activity. They can bring in any witness they have. What they don't have is the substance. They have a lot of activity. And when you bring in 100, 200, 500 witnesses, you get a lot of recollections, you get a lot of memories, you get a lot of notes, and that's what this is.
So, Mark, let me just read from this, just because I want to get your reaction to this. This is on page 3. So it says that the president suggested that his attorney falsely represent to the FBI and grand jury that Trump did not have the documents that they called for by the grand jury subpoena, directing the defendant Waltine Nauta to move boxes of documents to conceal them from Trump's attorney, the FBI, and the grand jury, suggesting that they hide or destroy documents, and you point out that there's no evidence of destruction, called for in the grand jury subpoena.
You can talk about whatever you want. Just think of this as a matter of logic. Mm-hmm. We've got dozens and dozens of boxes. Let's move them and conceal them with the Secret Service around, with movers around, with staff around. Does anybody take that seriously? Maybe somebody said it. Maybe we can move the document. There's been no challenge to this. There's a lot of ways to question this and to address this. So he moved boxes around. He lives into it. So what? Joe Biden moved boxes around into various places and so forth. Was there a subpoena out there? It doesn't matter. He went into a skiff when he was a senator and he took documents out. And that, in and of itself, is a crime. So there's a lot of issues here, really, that what's happened here, and I think the other lawyers will agree, is there's so much stuff thrown against the wall here. Mm-hmm. They had so many witnesses, so many documents, so many notes, that what happens is, and having served a justice, his team sits down, they cherry-pick the most favorable points that they can to them, they start the indictment document with the strongest points they think they have, and that's how they lay out the case. It's like having an opening debate. The guy gets up, he makes his opening statement, and then everybody goes home.
Yeah,
that's what this is.
I'm glad you called in, Mark, and I want to just remind everyone again of where we are in this process. This is the indictment. This is the accusation. And we have not heard from the other side of this equation. We haven't heard the explanations for why some of these things may or may not have happened from the Trump side. And Mark is expressing some of what I expect we will hear from the Trump side in terms of how this played out. And a lot of what you also see in here in some ways, Mark, reminds me of...
By the way, I haven't talked to the Trump side or any side.
Okay, thank you for making that clear. Some of this, and it will in some ways legally come down to the question of what was acted upon and how were these things acted upon. And in some ways, it reminds me of some of what we talked about during the impeachment situation with the Ukraine situation, things that were said, which a lot of which is very in character with what we've seen from the former president in terms of the way he talks about things. And how do you legally separate that out from the actions that were actually taken and whether or not laws were broken?
Look, this 31 counts on retention could have been 1 count. Could have been 5 counts. They made it 31 counts. You can bundle them together under 1 count. You can break them into 5 counts, or you can stretch them into 31 counts. So that's one of the things I think defense will challenge, among other things. But this gives the impression, it certainly gives the impression, that Donald Trump was there conspiring with his lawyers, conspiring with his staff, talking to himself in the middle of the night, trying to figure out ways to get rid of all this stuff. And you have to ask yourself why. Is there some crime among these documents? No. Is there something in these documents related to January 6th? Apparently not. Is there something in these documents related to his taxes that he cheated on, maybe? No. Is there something in the documents about some other crime he committed? No. Maybe he literally believed that as the former president, as the president leaving the White House, he had a right to these documents. The idea that they criminalized this case, and virtually this entire document relates to the criminalization of this case, as opposed to a civil or administrative case, is the problem. That they criminalized this case. They didn't do it in Hillary's case, or it would be Hillary in an orange jumpsuit in a federal prison as I speak, serving 120 years.
Mark, let me ask you, because you look at the presidency and the Constitution in all of your writing. Talk to me about the larger picture, because I think this is what is unnerving a lot of Americans on all sides of this equation. We have someone who is a declared candidate. He is currently in the lead. He's a former president of the United States who has been indicted on these charges. And there are similarities here. Every case is different in the cases that we saw with Hillary Clinton. And that's going to make people feel very uncomfortable in a lot of areas of this country. And you have the executive branch overseeing the investigation at the highest level, the president, the Attorney General Merrick Garland. What does this do to the fiber that holds the country together in a time when we're already so divided?
It destroyed it, and there's no going back. I was chief of staff to Attorney General Mason. I can tell you now this wouldn't have happened under him. He would have picked up the phone and called, say, Jimmy Carter and say, Jimmy, give us the GD materials now. Don't make me send these people in and so forth. And like, give me the material. They're itching here to send you to prison. Give me the stuff. There would have been a conversation, no matter how long it took, because he would have looked at the situation and said, I am not going to destroy this country. Do you know why Ed Meese resigned? He was under attack. He didn't have to resign. He told me, I'm resigning early because I don't want to affect the election with George H.W. Bush. That's what he said to me. And so we have Merrick Garland, who's sitting there, who's conspicuously silent today, even though behind the scenes, whether they want to say it or not, Mr. Smith reports to Mr. Garland. This is not the independent counsel statute. He's special counsel. He appointed this individual. He appointed Mr. Smith. So the attorney general can't have it both ways and say, I'm not involved in it. And they're putting, that information out. And you know what? That would even be worse. That means that bureaucrats are making decisions about the future of the presidency in this country. Does anybody believe that the framers of the Constitution believe that, well, there weren't U.S. attorneys, there was no Department of Justice, there was no attorney general, that if they existed, that they should have this kind of an impact on a presidency? The Espionage Act wasn't passed for this reason. It wasn't passed to gum up the works for a president or a future president or a presidential candidate. It was passed by a rogue president by the name of Woodrow Wilson, who imprisoned 2,000 political opponents who were opposed to World War I. Then they passed the Sedition Act in 1918, amending the Espionage Act, and they started locking up people who dared to speak out. This Espionage Act is a very, very dangerous law in many respects. So to use it and exploit it and turn it on a presidential candidate and a future president by criminalizing this case, which was never supposed to be criminalized against a past president, the Records Act, the Presidential Records Act, purposely passed in 1978, has no criminal provision to avoid situations like this. This is a disaster. This is a mess. And if Mr. Smith succeeds, it will even be worse. And notice how they're dumping all over the judge now. The judge was appointed by Trump. The judge in the case in Washington, D.C., who was handling all the motions decisions of the grand jury, who ruled against Trump every single time, was appointed by Obama. And that judge was replaced by another Obama judge who sits there right now. So now we're going to trash the judge, try and pressure the judge to throw the book at the president and deny all his motions. All right. This is what's going on. It is in the middle of a presidential election. What the hell have we become here? And this guy gets up, this guy Smith, who has a record going after the former governor of Virginia, and then he's rebuked by the Supreme Court 8-0. One of the few cases where they all came together.
In Virginia.
Yeah, McDonald.
Yeah.
And ruined his career.
That is true. That is true.
And he does the same to John Edwards in North Carolina, where the jury turned against him, because he's known for taking laws and pushing the boundaries as far as he can. And that's exactly what he did here with these pile-on charges going behind attorney-client privilege, and on and on and on.
Mark Levin. Mark, thank you very much. Good to have you with us today. Thank you for calling in.
You got it. God bless.
You too. So we have a panel standing by. Also with me here in New York City, former Utah Republican Congressman and House Oversight Chair Jason Chaffetz and Jessica Tarlov, co-host of The Five. Both are Fox News contributors. Great to have both of you with us today. Jess, let me start with you. You hear what Mark has to say there. We have only heard one side of this case so far, and that is from Jack Smith. And it got through the grand jury, which is a lower level of evidence that needs to be passed in order to get to the next stage, which would be a criminal trial in this case. What's your reaction to all of this today?
Well, listening to what Mark Levin was saying, and I know he was just on the phone, I'd hoped that he would be on air and we could see him and he could see what was going on the screen as he was talking, as you were panning over the photos that came out in the indictment of how these documents were kept at Mar-a-Lago.
He's seen the indictment. He went through the whole thing.
I understand, but when you are saying, I can't believe, how is this happening? How is this possible? You know, in all of our history, that is unprecedented. The way that those documents were stored, what's on that tape, him talking about the document, he runs his mouth and he ruins his chances at anyone who is not a diehard supporter being able to take his side in this. Everything that they've been trotting out for the last hour the last year has been disproven. When you talk about that they were all stored properly, they were all declassified. Now he's on tape saying
so you feel
this
the
one
same way about the ones that are behind the Corvette in the garage, right?
Well, the good thing about this is that Joe Biden has his own special counsel.
Absolutely.
And we'll find out what's going on there.
You're as appalled by that scene as you are by this, right?
I want to see what it is. I want to know how those documents were treated. I want to know if he was talking about them, if he knew that he had them and he was waving them around. If he was talking to random people about it. I mean, there was someone in the Mark Meadows conversation who said, now we're in trouble, right? This is something that people in his orbit knew was wrong.
I hear everything you're saying.
Yeah.
I just, I think in this country, because we have such an intense situation going on with all of this, and it's been going on for the past 8 years, it's very easy to jump ahead, right? And I'm just encouraging people. This is, by all accounts, Jonathan Turley, everybody else. So there's a lot in here, right? There's a lot in here. And the grand jury did find that they want to move forward with the trial. But we haven't heard the other side. That's all I'm saying. Jason.
Yeah, we haven't heard the other side. I find these photos to be gratuitous at best. I mean, for the FBI and the Department of Justice to put those photos out. Remember, Mar-a-Lago is not a place you just go walk by and go check in. These are protected by the United States Secret Service. And if you look really closely at some of the photos that come on, the ones that spilled on the ground, those are pictures of newspapers and of personal pictures of the president. That's not classified material right there.
I think there is
looks
some
bad.
they're saying there's some in there.
But a lot of them were turned back into the Department of Justice. I have a question for Donald Trump. Why not just turn them back in?
Well, that is the question.
We wouldn't be in this
and that
mess
is
at
the
all.
question. And honestly, what I don't understand is I can't believe we live in a country where when you leave as president, there's not a system where they. I've said this before, but I mean, if you leave this building on your last day, they're going to see what you're taking out.
Clinton's walked out of the White House
What are we
with
doing?
furniture,
What are we
for goodness
doing?
sake.
Why are you allowed to drag this stuff out? All of these people bring these documents out. I just find it absolutely ridiculous.
Of what's so distinct about this particular case, because other people, yes, have walked out with documents, and when the National Records Office reaches out and says, "Hey, we think you have some of our stuff," they say, "Oh my God," and they return it. They then
Joe
don't go
Biden
on this.
never went through
but
that.
He never was. The second that Joe Biden
Hillary bashed it with a hammer. She didn't say, "Oh my gosh, let me get it back."
I'm the one that signed the documents for the subpoenas, for the preservation letters. I signed these, and these things are subpoenaed. They destroyed them. They did it at the IRS. They did it with Hillary Clinton. Nothing. Jack Smith gets out there and gives this speech. That's the speech that should have been given about Hillary Clinton.
Well, but I've gone back now, and I think we all have, to read Comey's rationalization of why he didn't move forward with it. And we're going to have to talk a lot about whether you're careless or grossly negligent. And I think that we know now, looking at this, and we'll see, he deserves his day in court and he will get it. And I'm very happy that there was a grand jury that did this, because I hear nonstop that this is about Merrick Garland, this is about partisans, this is about people, his peers, and people in South Florida, which makes a big difference, because I hear constantly, he can't get a fair trial in New York, he can't get a fair trial in D.C. South Florida, that's his home. That's DeSantis country, right? That's a ruby red state now at this point who thought that it deserved to go forward with this indictment. It feels so dishonest, and I would like to believe, and I'll put it out there right now, if I see the same thing from Joe Biden, you better believe that I'll want him to, A, drop out of the race and we'll find someone else to run, and that he should go in front of that jury and that they'll inevitably find him guilty of something.
One of the problems with that, though, Jessica, is that I don't think any American watching this process feels like there is the aggressive effort underway to answer the question that you just asked. And I think that is what has become so heartbreaking in all of this. People watch this thing. That thing's taking 4.5 years to go through Hunter Biden's laptop, and they had it sitting on a shelf in the FBI for a long time and basically ignored it. And this thing is got the afterburners on it in 2 minutes. Now, I talked to Bill Barr about this. His take was that he said this is a simpler case in terms of these documents in this House, the way they were treated and the evidence they have. But I just think that I'm speaking for a lot of Americans who watch this and go, it feels like it doesn't work.
They came into Mar-a-Lago, which is protected by the United States Secret Service, with guns a-blazing, television cameras in tow. Did they go to the Penn Center where the classified documents for Joe Biden were? No, they didn't do that. Did they go to the Biden's household? No, they didn't do that. And it wasn't protected at the time by the United States Secret Service. So they did not do. And how did he, as a United States senator,
senators should not have any of these things in there. So let me ask you this, Jessica. Do you believe that there is the same aggression, the same effort going into figuring out if those documents that were at the house where Hunter lived, was he showing them to anybody? Did he share them with any of the people that he worked with in Ukraine or anywhere else? Was he promising them that he could sort of give them the inside scoop based on anything? I don't know what the answer to these questions are, but do you really believe that there's an aggressive investigation into those questions?
Well, I assume the special counsel and before today, everyone was fine with both the special counsel in Joe Biden's case, and Jack Smith had an unassailable reputation, and now I'm hearing that that's not the case anymore because he went and he found someone.
Never believe that.
All right, I get, someone's mom loved JFK and suddenly they're not good enough, or someone's wife happens to be a Democrat and then all they do is see red when they see Republicans. It's ridiculous. These are public servants who serve honorably for decades, and they deserve our respect for this. I truly believe that no one who works in the Department of Justice is happy about this happening. They weren't happy the day Alvin Bragg came out and did that. They don't want this. No one wants to change precedent. But the president, Donald Trump, is demanding that things are different now because he has been so abusive to the rule of law here.
And
he ignored subpoenas.
And Mitt Romney said that the former president brought this on himself, Jason.
Well, I don't understand why he didn't just give the documents back, but I also don't understand why Hillary Clinton, on the very day she started her Senate confirmation, put up her own homebrewed computer, and then the FBI director comes out and says there was no intent to bypass the Federal Records Act. That thing was chock full of tens of thousands of documents, highly classified. Again, when the FBI goes in to talk to Hillary Clinton, they didn't even take notes. They were told to put their notes aside. Don't even take notes. Look at how different they treated Donald Trump with CNN in tow. Hey, let's go with guns a-blazing. Are you kidding me? Nobody believes it's equally applied.
First of all, guns a-blazing is a very specific image that was not true. They first of all went in on a day when they knew he wouldn't be there to make sure that it was anticlimactic. They had ignored subpoenas, which is why this happens. And you talk all the time about all the subpoenas that you gave out. You know that they're important.
And none of them were enforced. None of the subpoenas that I issued as a duly issued subpoena from the United States Congress, were they enforced? None of them.
Hillary Clinton, first of all, has paid in other ways for making that decision. The American public largely felt that it was improper.
Either the legal system and the rule of law are the same for everyone, or they're not. You can't say, well, she lost an election.
But they did different things. And Colin Powell had a private server, too.
She destroyed them. She destroyed them. If Donald Trump had lit them on fire, would that
Donald Trump just wishes he had better lawyers. We got that on
you
record
have the
now.
right to ask your attorney questions.
To say, can you destroy evidence? You have a right to do that?
You will ask your attorney.
Guys, I'm going to jump in. We got to go. But thank you very much, Jessica Tarlov.
I like Jessica. We still get along.
We all like each other. We're trying to figure out what's going on here. Jason Chaffetz, thank you. Great to see you both. Jess, always thank you.